and put in a story
we're on.
to announce it.
And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm your host, John Webster. With me, as always, is my co-host and fellow cinephile, Amy Blackfire. And joining us today are Cecilia from Geeksterilia and my wonderful Here Be Dryden's co-host, Steven Stark. You may know him. How you guys doing?
Had a busy day today, but watched the movie again, so I'm ready.
Let me know if you guys hear an echo because I don't have my headphones. So just let me know if that's a problem. But yeah, we are watching Pan's Labyrinth, or we did watch Pan's Labyrinth. Wow, I'm not with it today. We are talking about Pan's Labyrinth. Everybody. This actually, interestingly, this poster drawn by, oh God, I'm going to butcher his name, Drew Struzan. I think the guy who did all the old, like, special edition Star Wars posters and the prequel posters. This was done by him. The studio rejected it and went for something else, which is ridiculous because this is such like a perfect iconic image for the movie, I think. But yeah, there's my rant about the poster for the day. I just have to say I love this movie, guys. I've been really looking forward to talking about it. But I will hand it over to you guys to start off with. Cecilia, why don't you talk to us first about your experience with this movie? When did you see it?
Okay, well, the movie was released in 2006, so I was already an adult when this happened. I went to watch it in the movies, in the theater, and oh my goodness, it was so impressive. I've been a fan of Guillermo del Toro's work for so long, and this movie in particular was well, I can't really find the word for it because in one side is so charming and so beautiful and so aesthetically beautiful in every sense, and the story is also very beautiful, but it's also very sad.
Yeah.
In many ways. So every Mexican has some Spanish relative in one degree or another, and we know a little bit about the whole Franco thing, and so we understand what it is like to be in a reality where there's a dictatorship, and the difficulties to live under that kind of oppression, right? So it is very beautiful to see a little girl trying to run away from that reality in a fantasy world. But then again, there are a lot of special things about this movie that make you wonder whether that whole thing that she lived was real or was just her imagination. And
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite movies. Mm-hmm.
If I can jump in, I just want to go off of what Cecilia said.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of the unclear nature of the ending of this film is probably one of its greatest strengths. I loved this movie. I don't remember when I first watched it. It was not in the theater. I probably rented it from Blockbuster or something like that. But it's such a charming film. And I don't know, we're going to get into some of the things that raised an eyebrow. But my biggest question is, in a Spanish language movie called Pan's Labyrinth, why is there only one scene with bread in it?
You have a
Oh,
point on
you.
that.
My
Yes,
work here is
you do
done.
have a
Dios
point on that.
mío.
I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Tip your waiters.
And I was muted, so you guys didn't hear what I said, but I was saying this is why you're here, Steven.
Mm.
But
I was
yeah,
surprised I didn't see paella in
I
the
know,
scene where
right?
it's
I don't
really
know.
yeah, it's important also to note that the actual title of this film is El Laberinto del Fauno, which means the labyrinth of the faun. So it's not actually Pan's Labyrinth, but apparently the studio thinks that the only faun American audiences will know, other than probably Mr. Tumnus, is Pan. So they went with the title Pan's Labyrinth, which it does sound cool, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, to be clear, the labyrinth, the faun of this film is not Pan, but he's just known as the faun. So
One
yeah,
thing that I want to say before we dive into the movie itself is that I was so grateful that this movie was made in Spanish because, well, the movie is set in Spain, and well, the director is Mexican, so it was very special for me to know that even though the studios pressured Guillermo del Toro to make this movie in English to appeal to a wider audience, he refused it, despite the fact that they were going to give him double the money to do the movie, and he said, "No, this movie is going to be in Spanish because it's a Spanish story." So yeah, and I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and
yeah,
when they say a wider audience too, I mean there are
Hmm.
so many Spanish speakers in the world. That's a pretty wide audience already. It's very
Hmm.
English centric to the general cinema kind of, especially the award shows as well, are so focused on English language films. So
Hmm.
much so that foreign films usually just get pigeonholed into one category. And so the first time I saw this, I guess I was 13. Gonna date myself once again. I was in a Blockbuster, and my mom didn't
Hmm.
believe in parental control. She thought if I said I could handle a movie, I could handle a movie. And I watched all sorts of horror stuff and all sorts of things before most parents would say a kid was ready. But I literally, anything I put in her hand at Blockbuster, she checked out for me. Or she rented
Hmm.
for me. It didn't matter. So I was really happy for that, because this movie blew my mind, and I watched it so many times. And I actually, if I remember right, I ended up going to give it back, and then I just rented another copy because I wanted to keep watching it again and again. This was one of the first movies in my life that I watched multiple times and loved it every single time and saw something new and enjoyed it even more. So Pan's Labyrinth holds a really, really special place in my heart. It also, whenever I started taking Spanish in high school, it was one of the movies that I would like to watch to see how much I didn't need the subtitles, since I was in Spanish class. So the more I watched it, the more I understood. And throughout the years of taking Spanish, so I watched it once a year pretty much for 5 years straight. It's really it's in my top 5 movies. And for a couple of years there, it was my favorite movie of all time. So Pan's Labyrinth holds a really special place in my heart, and I'm glad that my mom wasn't super strict about the rating and saying, "Oh, you're only, this age, you can't do it," because I think I was in some ways a more mature kid than a lot of other kids
Hmm.
when it comes to horror. I
Yeah.
didn't get as scared, and I was able to understand really, obviously, the violent themes that are in this movie. I was able to handle that, which I don't think everyone necessarily at that age was able to do.
yeah. It,
Hmm.
I I do want to say that this movie struck a particular chord with me when I saw it. I was not a teenager, um, but it's interesting. This came out just about 3 years after Lord of the Rings had finished, and it's a fantasy film, but it's not completely. It's certainly not in the same vein as Lord of the Rings. But for some reason, I remember thinking that this was something that triggered my imagination in a way that nothing had since Lord of the Rings had. And I remember saying that this was my most treasured movie going experience since probably Fellowship of the Ring at the time. And I still hold to that.
That's high praise coming from John.
It really is.
And I loved seeing the reception it got at the Oscars that year, because it didn't do as well as I would have personally liked it to do, but it still got a lot of great recognition. It got 6 nominations. I think it was foreign language film, original screenplay, original score, and then it won for art direction, cinematography, and makeup. I still can't believe it didn't win best foreign language film, but we'll save that. But yeah, I remember sitting in the theater. I was just transfixed watching this film, and yeah, like I said, it was for me like the most impactful thing since Fellowship. And I remember sometimes you see those movies where it actually registers with you that you're seeing something that's going to leave a mark on you. And this was definitely one of those films.
Yeah. What about you, Steven?
Well, I mean, I kind of already said, like, this is a hero's journey. And Ofelia goes through every stage of a hero's journey. And anybody that knows me knows I'm a sucker for that hero story, you know? She's got to pass through the underworld a couple of times. She gets the call to action. You know, she's skeptical about it. And she's got to face all kinds of mystical horrors. And I also just love at the end her sort of final test to pass is to say, I'm not going to give him up while you're holding a dagger. You know, yes, this scene right here where she, this is such an emotional scene. I'm not going to lie, I might have shed a couple of tears right here at the end of the film. There's something powerful to be said about self-sacrifice, so that whether or not you think the ending of this film is real, or, you know, is she dead? Is she gone back to being a fairy princess? No, either outcome doesn't change the journey she went on to get to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the lessons she learned were real, right? Whether or not there was actually this eye monster, right? She learned that, you know, you can't just be, you know, impulsive and do things like eat the grapes, right? And she learned about, also, I think she learned with, just with interacting with the faun too, is that it is actually good to be skeptical and to question authority, which is something that I think, you know, kids eventually do, but they're taught that that's not, you should always, you know, later we get to stranger danger and don't just listen to whatever, you know, adults tell you. But especially the traditional way to raise kids was to, you know, listen to what adults tell you to do. And that's what the captain wants her to do, right? Her stepfather is like, do what I tell you to do and don't question it. And his followers, you know, there's that line that says, you know, I can't just follow orders blindly like you do.
Yeah, and and that's a very important thing to Del Toro, is that Ofelia continues to question, and she follows her instincts, and that's what guides her. And in the end, you know, her decision is one of defiance, where she's, you know, questioning what she's being told to do.
Actually, the bigger test was that, but she being able to question and be rebellious to some regime that was based on blind obedience. And well, we see a lot of contrast between Ofelia and the general. I don't remember his name, the name of the character.
Vidal. Yeah.
Vidal, General Vidal. They were polar opposites in many, many ways. I wanted to rewatch the movie before coming here, but I wasn't able to do it. So I looked for some analysis on YouTube, and one that caught my attention was that they are polar opposites in many, many ways, many symbolic ways, as in that they are the sun and the moon in alchemia. I mean, from one side, would you see the masculine side, the violent side, and and while Ophelia is the moon side, she even has um, moon shaped mark in her left shoulder. The left thing is something important here, and we see these contrasts. We see a lot of this contrast between them, of she being more prone to the magical side of life, to the feminine side of life, and while he is like strictly spoken, well, following orders, and everything is structured, and everything is violent, but in a very extreme way. Okay, because what we're saying is that none of these sides is inherently bad, because well, the balance between these two sides is what is the ideal, right? In alchemia, this is what is the ideal. But we are seeing a very extreme representation of the male side, in General Vidal. And
Captain, I'm just going to say it, Captain
Captain.
Vidal.
Okay, Captain. Yeah, I'm not very. uh,
Jenna,
yeah.
I'm giving Jenna's comment a drink because that's close enough for me. I
Yeah,
think
it could
also
be.
talking about alchemic theory, this goes back to Taoism. You guys know I'm going to talk about Chinese stuff, which goes back to yin and yang, which is that they need to be in balance and there needs to be a little bit of one in each. And Vidal, he represents the toxicity, if you will, the toxic masculinity, right? The overdoing of something to the point where it's harmful to everyone around you, right? So he kills those guys that were saying, "Hey, we are out hunting rabbits," and then when they die, we realize they were doing exactly what they said they were doing. And even if they were quote unquote the enemy, they didn't deserve to die in such a horrific fashion. So the way that he does literal overkill represents how the young, or the male, the active, the bright, the sun, right? The bright is too much. And I will say also, Cecilia, what you made me think about when you mentioned the moon and this idea of the dualism of male and female, and of course this doesn't account for non-binary individuals and the fact that the binary is bullcrap anyway, but we're talking about that on Nessie's channel next month, so I'll leave my thoughts for that. Her mom is the first thing is she's put into a wheelchair. She's rendered inactive, like the yin, like the female, like the shady, and the moon, right? And yet we have Ofelia, who is so active and she's doing all of these things. So, you do see kind of a difference in this dualism as well. While Ofelia does represent the moon and is the daughter of the moon, she's such a willful child that she actually goes against what is traditionally associated with that element.
Yeah, and we even see this conflict between her and her mom. When she's reading a book of fairy tales, and she tells her that she is already too old for that. And then when she finds the mandragora, I don't know how to, the mandrake. I forget the word in English. The mandrake under her bed, and that was considered sorcery or some kind of thing that it was not good under the eyes of a right-winged regime. The Franco's dictatorship was very supported by the Catholic Church in Spain. So finding something like this would be a sin, and it's punished. So that's another way that you can see this struggle between her and the environment that she is involved in.
Yeah, I think you both make an excellent point about that duality of nature. But while I was watching this film, became very aware of how it was less about the ideology. Yes, they're fascists and they're terrible people, but
Mhm.
for Vidal, it was very much an ego-driven
Yeah.
thing throughout the entire movie, to the point that
Mhm.
his men were very expendable to him. He would kill anyone that crossed him. Um, the scene with the two hunting men where he kills them both, and they turned out to have been hunting. That wasn't because he necessarily respected or suspected them. Maybe he did suspect them. Maybe he didn't. He didn't find the proof, but he killed them because they spoke out of turn.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's where, and
Yeah.
that's how he goes through this entire film, which I think can muddy the water a little bit, as far as like trying to draw that symbolism between light and the dark, because he comes off as being maybe, and again, not a gender studies major or anything like that, so forgive my ignorance if I sound like an idiot coming up, but and I understand what you're saying about that masculine violent energy, but he's a sociopath, and
Yes.
so like, is he is sociopath really a representative of like yin gone wrong, or yin gone to the extreme? Maybe it is.
Sorry, it's young for the male energy. I'm
Okay,
sorry. I'm
well,
sorry.
well,
Unnecessary pedantry. I love you so
no,
much,
no,
Stephen, and you
that
know that.
pedantry is absolutely necessary. We
Actually, I
needed that one.
think that's a really good point, Stephen. His
Mhm.
sociopathy, I think, is actually a good point to look at, because I think that is when you take this warlike aspect too far, it goes to ego, and it's not about quote unquote protecting anymore, which is kind of the good part of being quote unquote violent, right? It's that, oh, you could be protecting people, but his is, like you were saying, Stephen, is ego driven, and it's about him maintaining his authority over people. And I do see that as
Yes.
Yang gone awry, just
Okay.
as Yin
Giving
could
a
go
legacy,
too far as
leaving a
well.
legacy, because that's the reason why he's obsessed with having a son instead of a daughter. And
Oh boy, Cecilia.
yes.
Thanks for mentioning it. Drink.
Yes.
I wanted to
Yeah.
sip
I
my
mean,
coffee anyway.
Uh,
it is
as a,
ego driven. I mean, this is what I mentioned about the yin and the yin, the sun and the moon, and the masculine and the feminine side, is because this is just a symbolism within the story, and how they and how what's the contrast between Ofelia and Vidal. But in a more non symbolic way to see that, yes, he is a sociopath, that he wants to he's obsessed with leaving a legacy, because, well, he is an authority in that town. And this story takes place 5 years after the Spanish Revolution. And well, there are still some uh, outbreaks of rebels. We see it in some protagonists in the story. And he is trying to prove himself valuable to this larger cause, and so to speak. But he's more like trying to prove himself to his father that died in this war. And this is why he's so attached to this clock. Some
Mhm.
people even compare him to Kronos, to the god Kronos. But well, he's just I don't know. I don't know. He's just obsessed with proving himself. I don't know, for his father or for himself or to the or to Franco himself. I don't know.
You see that in the end when he insists that his son know about him. And then when they say your son will not even know your name, the look he gives is one of loss. It's like he actually died in that moment before he physically died because his memory died.
Yeah.
And right before that moment, we have the faun asking for the baby. And he says something to her like, if you don't do this, that's it. No more. And you're going to become immortal and you're going to get old and you're going to die and everybody's going to forget you. The opposite of a legacy, which she is willing to trade she's willing to trade that to do what she feels is the right thing, which it does make her sort of very, very opposite to Vidal in that way, because that's all he wants. Oh, this scene.
And the idea of sacrifice, I know, right? The idea of sacrifice is only true if it's a self-sacrifice, right? It's only pure if it's you sacrificing yourself. That's something we talked about when the X-Men stream last week, plug. We were talking about, there's a line from Wolverine that said, you know, if you really cared about what you were doing, it'd be you in that machine, right? There's this idea of self-sacrifice is if you sacrifice someone else, it's not a real sacrifice, right? So you can tell that the Vidal is willing to sacrifice everyone around him but himself for this cause. And that's what makes him truly a sociopath and just a terrible person in general.
Yeah.
But Stephen, I think you're really onto something, thinking about how his sociopathy really represents how his egotism is overtaking everything, and how it actually pushes the story forward in a way that hurts literally everyone around him. And him. Yeah. And, you know,
and he doesn't even love himself that much. And you see that in the scene where he is shaving him.
Yeah, and
he is like,
takes a knife, like he cuts his throat.
Yes.
Narcissism is extreme self-love and self-hate at the same time. They actually hate and love themselves. It's very interesting. It's added. It was only added in the DSM manual in 1980. So the idea of narcissism as a mental, as a personality disorder is new, but it is interesting what psychologists have already been able to uncover. And part of that I'm sorry, my mom has a master's in psychology. Part of that is having extreme self-love and self-hate at the same time. And talk about conflicting. I mean, wow, that's very weird and awful. Not a great way to live.
No.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I hate to derail the conversation, but I have an observation, and I would especially like to throw it. I mean, John, we haven't heard much from you, to be honest, on your own channel.
I know, but you guys, like, my job here is, at least to step out
drive
of
the conversation.
I got you, buddy. But I have a question, and now I've seen this film probably 4 or 5 times now, and I did just watch it again today, and it had been a while. And something I noticed on this watch through, and maybe you guys have a different take on it, but Ophelia's mom is kind of the worst, man. Like, I understand you're 9 months pregnant, but like, she ignores her daughter all the time, tells her, this is your dad now. And I'm like, why did you marry a fascist?
Because it was convenient for her. I mean,
that's kind of
but you gotta understand something. Yeah. You gotta understand that this is a woman in extreme right Spain dictatorship who lost her husband in the war. We don't get to know how he died, but it is obvious that she lost him in the war. She is alone with a daughter.
I think there's also reason to suspect, even though it's not flat out said, that and Del Toro hints towards this as much as a potential thing, that Vidal you know, you can
Yeah,
speculate whether
exactly. That
Vidal
was.
actually had something to do with the husband's
Hmm.
death,
Hmm.
since he doesn't seem to have any issue with killing at the drop of a hat. And I think it's particularly
Hmm.
a, possible that that the relationship was forced on her by him. Um,
Yeah.
and there may have even been, he could have violated her. It could not be as simple as she just
Hmm.
went on.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and
I would,
when
I would, I just think I would prefer to know some of that in the film because it might make Carmen a little more relatable or sympathetic.
hmm
But
well,
I think that that's there, like under the surface of that conversation in the dinner scene. I think that what isn't said is very powerful. It feels
mhm.
like there's something we're not hearing, and I feel like that conveys a lot for me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, they were saying in the chat that this woman in the 40s without a husband was an absolutely no boy, and it is, and this is true, and especially in a very conservative society like Spain. Well,
Like Franco's
Spain is not,
Spain.
yeah, Franco's Spain. This,
Okay, this is why I asked the question because I'm like,
mhm.
help me feel some more sympathy for this woman. I mean, it's not like I felt no sympathy, but there was just this like, wow, you're kind of like, I hate the way you're treating Ophelia. I hate the way you're engaging with your daughter.
Well, she's trying to. Well, my from my point of view, she's trying to make her tough a little
Okay,
bit, to toughen her up a little bit, because, well, in a she's living in a world of fairy tales. She believes that in, I don't know, true love and that kind of stuff. And while her mother has already experienced loss, and she has already been um, confronted with a reality where having no husband as a woman with a child is tough,
sure,
and she had to make this choice to marry this guy who had some power in order to gain a better position in life for her and her daughter. But she didn't really realize the kind of man that he was, or maybe she did, but maybe she didn't have a choice. I don't know. I mean, I do feel sympathy for her. I don't like the way she treats her as well, but I understand why. And
okay. She's
The
not
way,
just the worst.
so
I got
mhm,
you. She's not
I
the worst.
go ahead and get ready to cancel me, chat. I actually had the initial reaction that Steven did as well, mostly
mhm,
because I saw how it's obvious that she's afraid of him, and look in the end how Vidal just straight up shot Ophelia. Like, obviously the mother was afraid constantly, but I think that she says, Ophelia, you need to grow up, yet she won't explain things to her like a grown up, right? She
mhm,
won't say, I'm doing this because for your own good, because blah blah blah. She just says, grow up, stop having your head in the clouds, right? And I understand that the mother is very afraid, but at the same time, the kind of internalized misogyny that her mom is expressing is very
mhm,
harmful to her daughter, and she
yeah,
seems so concerned with her new, even it's not like, oh, I'm so happy, yay, this new family, but she does seem concerned with setting up this new household that Ophelia is going to feel left behind naturally. And I think that a couple of conversations and a couple just giving her, kind of giving Ophelia some attention would have helped a lot, because Ophelia was just kind of running off and doing all the, which is great because then we get these awesome adventures, the
Mhm.
hero's journey, like Stephen loves. But at the same time,
yeah,
it's really, unfortunately, especially in a patriarchal society, it's really the mother's job to explain to her daughter why we need to, to have these kinds of,
mhm,
compromises, if you
I
will,
think
with the
I
system.
think this is also
yeah, but
something that Del Toro is really trying to say, which is taking a look at the way that adults in general look at children, the way they
mhm,
talk down to them. And I know from Guillermo del Toro's point of view, was about to just say Guillermo's point of view. I know him personally, guys.
Yeah. You and Guillermo go way back. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
But he looks at children as the people that we should look up to and sort of hold up as they've got their shit figured out. It's the adult, we muck things up.
and yeah, well, one thing that I would like to say is that, well, apart from the fact that well, children were expected to do as adults say because they say so. Well, back in the day, parents had different priorities. I mean, we're talking that this is a society that is just coming out from war. So priorities are different. I mean, maybe, and this is something that I was discussing with my husband yesterday, I guess, and my mother-in-law, is that before past generations, since they have different priorities in life and life was tougher, up to a certain point was tougher, the priority was just okay, my children ate something today. Okay, I'm doing my job right as a parent. I'm done with my job as a parent, and that was it. And especially if you're coming out of difficult times in general, such as a post-war, and well, some people before in during these times didn't really stop to think that maybe my child, maybe my daughter, maybe my son needs some of my attention, needs some of my guidance, because that was not a priority back in the day. You were worried, literally. Your biggest worry was that they were fed, and they had a house to, I don't know, to live. And maybe this is exactly what's going on. Maybe this is why Ophelia's mom didn't really stop to talk with her daughter about what is going on and why it's going on.
Well, and I think the moments where they were having, kind of a touching mother-daughter moment were always about the unborn child, like Ofelia laying on her mother's stomach and telling a story to her coming child, or her coming sibling, pardon me. So those were the kind of quiet moments that I think that, obviously back then I understand parenting is different, but at the same time, I do think people are people, and people have always had the same emotional needs, and it's just a question of what is culturally expected of parents. But it doesn't mean that that kids didn't need a childhood any less.
Yeah. Also, speaking of moments between the two of them, I just want to point out one moment that I really love, where the mother actually seems to give a little bit of way, is after the dress has been ruined and Ophelia is, in the bathtub, and, she's being scolded by her mother, and her mother's like, your father is very upset with you. And Ophelia says, you mean the captain? And she says, yes. And there's that smile on her face of, I got her to relent on that point just for a second. I did love that little touch.
Good stuff for sure.
No, maybe I didn't. Sorry, it was experimental light. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Like I was saying, priorities were different. And
Guilty Undertaker had a comment a moment ago. Let me see if I'm scrolling up. We don't even know what side Ophelia's father fought on, and that's actually a very fair point. So I have a theory. Okay, we know that he used to make the captain's uniforms, so he is a tailor, and he was probably a spy for the other side. Because he is secretly, her father is actually Hercules Mulligan. Thank you. I'll be here all week. John, are you ready to kick me off yet?
I don't even know where you're pulling that from, Steve, aside from just your obsession with
Hercules Mulligan was a tailor who spied on the British government for the Sons of Liberty. He made British uniforms, but then was a spy against the British.
I like it.
A time-traveling Hercules Mulligan. Okay. Well, in all seriousness, though, I asked that question, or the actual serious one I asked a few minutes ago, because like I did have difficulty understanding how did you get here, and there was a certain amount of me that went, I can see that she is in a position that she doesn't necessarily want to be in, but I'm like, why didn't you just tell him no? But then you're like, it's the 40s. She's a widow in a fascist regime.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, okay. So there was a whole lot of backed into a corner there that didn't necessarily fire in my head during the watch. But I was watching going, God, could you just like be loving to your daughter or something? I mean, I get that you're having a difficult pregnancy, but like, you've got 2 kids. You've got this one. She's important. But
well, I think she's also a bit like, we want Ofelia to have her, head in, the fairy tale books and to, and to give credence to all this. But from her mother's perspective, especially when she starts talking to a faun and fairies, it's like I'm trying to make our lives somewhat survivable in a fascist regime. I can see the inclination to say, please just stop, going on about all this stuff. But because we're seeing the story from Ophelia's perspective, naturally we're like, no, just believe her, what she's telling you. So, yeah. But
like the reason I asked is the reason, so that I could get the answers that you gave, so that I could be a little more sympathetic, so I can look at Carmen and go, you're not a terrible mom. You're a woman who's in over her head in a situation that's well beyond her control.
On the other hand, I think we can all pretty much agree that that Mercedes is the best.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Oh my goodness.
When she goes after Vidal with the knife, I'm just like, that is one of the best scenes in that whole movie. Just in the back, in the shoulder, in the other shoulder, and that cut through the cheek. Ooh, oh. And then looking at it in the mirror, and you're like, oh my God.
You want to know how I got these scars?
Right, exactly.
Although I will say, as nice as that scene was, like kind of finally, it felt like vindication. We were having a watch party, and in the comments, someone was like, she should just cut his throat, which is a really good point. Like, make sure that he's hella dead would have been the best. But, then we wouldn't have gotten that really dramatic, scene with him running after his infant son. So, you know what? I'll allow it. But Mercedes is badass. I love her.
Yeah.
And I like that her motivations are very clear, too. We don't necessarily get that in all of the characters as well.
Some people mention in this analysis for this movie, some people mention that this Mercedes is very much like it's like a grown-up Ofelia, fighting the injustice and doing what is right, and actually caring for people around her, which is very much like what Ofelia is doing, but we get to see a grown-up woman trying to find some justice in life, and trying to do the right thing. And that is very much like another side of the coin for this for this fight, like, this whole conflict. And I really really love the actress. Maribel Verdú is really one extraordinary actress.
Is that Mercedes?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's Mercedes. And in one of the interviews that I saw, uh, Guillermo del Toro said that he picked her, that actress, because he saw some sadness in her. so so he thought that she was perfect for the character, and she really was. She really was.
Yeah, and it's interesting listening to him talk, because he talked about how um, he picked a lot of these actors sort of against type for what they had played before. And I know
Hmm.
he was actually told by somebody on the production, no, you're casting these parts all wrong. These
Hmm.
actors don't do that type of thing. And he's like, I don't care.
Hmm.
they're gonna, they're
Yeah,
gonna be great. Yeah, and they
one of
were.
one of the actors was actually a comedy actor. I believe he was
Yeah,
like the doctor. I don't remember if it was the doctor, but I think it was.
yeah, pretty
I
sure.
mean, he was famous for being for doing silly comedy stuff in Spain, and that's precisely what they told him, that he wasn't going to be good enough for the part, and he just said, "You know what? I don't care."
And he's great. I mean, and I don't know if it helps that I hadn't seen a lot of these actors
Hmm.
before. Because it's you have all these actors who are not from America, so I'm not used to
Hmm.
seeing them. And but like I thought that they were all just utterly amazing. And
Hmm.
when I hear that they're not known for this type of work, I'm like, that's amazing, because they're just incredible.
Yeah, well, Maribel Verdú, she is a drama actress. She appeared in a movie made by Carlos Cuarón, who is the brother of Alfonso Cuarón. That is called Y tu mamá también.
Mm.
And mhm. And she is the protagonist of the story, along with Diego Luna and the other actor. like, uh, yeah, s- her character in that movie is immensely different from Mercedes, but well, you can see that she's a very complete actress here. And I recently saw her in a comedy that is it's a parody of Superman, a Spanish parody of Superman called Super Lopez, where she is,
Sounds
wh-
great.
yeah, where she is sort of like the Lex Luthor of the story, and she's really hilarious. So if you want to see a little bit more about her work, well, I recommend you see that. It's very absurd. The humor is very, very absurd, but that's sort of the point. Okay. But yeah, she's a very great actress. I didn't really know many of the actors there because, well, Spanish shows are not necessarily super popular here in Latin America, except for some of them. But it has a little to do with the accent. The, yeah,
That's
it's
something I noticed. This is
mhm,
definitely Spain Spanish,
mhm,
not the
mhm.
Mexican Spanish I grew up hearing.
No, not at all. And this is very weird. Now that you touch that point, is that Spanish accent feels natural and feels okay to your ears when you hear from real life actors. But one thing that every Latin American will tell you is that uh, dubbing, dubbing, I don't know, voiceovers and
Yeah,
Spanish
Hmm.
dubbing.
stuff, It's terrible. It's terrible. It's awful. I don't know why is that difference. I don't know if they just exaggerate the accent, and that's a little bit tough to hear for us. But yeah, but you don't get that feeling when you are seeing real actors, real life actors. It's different.
Well, I think dubbing is always terrible. So
Yeah.
Yeah, sub all the way.
Well,
I was overjoyed that they never, as far as I know, there is at the very least there's no English dub for Pan's Labyrinth.
no.
So I was very delighted, so that everybody, when we did the watch party, nobody could decide to turn on, an English
Mhm.
language track. I was like, no, you're gonna watch this movie as it's meant to be seen and like it.
And a fun fact here is that Guillermo del Toro doesn't like people translating his work. He translated himself because he doesn't. Well, in the past, he saw some translation of his work, and he was like, "No, this is all wrong." And he writes everything twice, an English version
That's
and a
commitment
Spanish.
because he could
Yeah.
totally just farm that out.
Mhm.
Um,
As
and the
someone
Spanish
who,
accent, for those watching that are not necessarily familiar, has kind of a lisp to it, and yet it sounds really nice in this movie. And
in
that's
the
not always
Catalan
been my experience with the Spanish accent.
Yeah.
So
in the Catalan region, they have more of a lisp anyway. Like
yeah,
they do the Barcelona
Mhm.
thing.
Barcelona. Yeah, the C's and the Z's are pronounced like th. Uh-huh.
I'm with Reflective Rambling. Stop giving me reasons to love him. And look, I will say, as somebody who speaks some Spanish, I can probably read it better than I can understand it spoken, just because I don't know, for whatever reason. But
Mhm.
like I know there was a point where somebody said "hasta luego," but the translation was "good night," and I'm like, well, it's nighttime. That is
Mhm.
not the exact translation, my friend,
No.
but it's good enough.
Mhm. Well, that's what translating is. I mean,
Hmm.
giving you the general idea of what the
Yeah,
other person said. Mhm.
it's not changing word for word. It's
Mhm.
carrying the meaning over.
Mhm. Mhm.
exactly. Like whenever Chinese movies have subtitles, like John, Stephen, and I, we reviewed Hero on this YouTube channel on John Webster Film at Joef, if you will. And there are a couple of lines where, yeah, like especially because Chinese is also a very it has a lot of these like what we would call idioms, like raining cats and dogs. But it has a lot of poetic kind of things like that. So it you would be like there's one, for example, there's one that literally means like you have three hearts but two motivations, and it means you're not fully committed. And you would say you're not fully committed, you would not say you have three hearts and two motivations. Right? The direct
Yeah.
translation can get silly. And so I am a translator, and I have learned long ago to not attach myself so much to the direct meaning of things, because the native speaker of English is going to think you're being a dumbass. So that's the way it is.
That said, some translations are better than others, and the Hero
Mhm.
needs a new release
It
with
does.
more
Yes.
correct
Yes.
subtitles.
Qianxia means all under heaven. It does not mean our country.
Yeah.
Hill,
And
me
you know
dying
that
on it.
in Spanish there are a lot of expressions that are very hard to translate or are completely untranslatable. I don't know if you guys have watched Roma
I haven't
from
seen it yet.
from Alfonso Cuarón. I strongly recommend it, but there's a phrase there where the protagonist hurts herself in some, I don't know, she hits herself or something happens that no, I remember. Um, she got pregnant, and well, it was an issue, and because she was like the maid of the house, and she was telling well, the owner of the house that she was pregnant, and that she didn't know that the father didn't make responsible for it, and she was crying, and one of the children of the owner of the house comes with her and asks her if she is hurt, and she says, yes, I'm hurt. And then he says, sana sana colita de rana, which is something that
Something a little frog's butt.
yeah, it's like heel tail of a frog. That's kind of like the literate translation of it. Of course, it doesn't make any sense for you. I completely understand, but it's like just this silly sort of spell or something that every time you tell that to a kid who just made a boo boo or something, it will make them. It's like a placebo.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a placebo kind of charm.
Yeah,
but
it kind of reminds me of knock on wood. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't understand, nice, Steven. I need to do the dad joke. If you don't explain what that, it just means like, oh, hope you say something and you're like, knock on wood, like, which means I hope what I said doesn't happen, or I hope what I said holds, right? And so like you could technically just directly translate that to knock on wood, but it's a very kind of cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Spanish we do say that too, but
Hey, Alicia.
Hey, AK.
But I mean, the translation in the subtitles of that heel tail of a frog, they translate it like that, and everybody's like, what? But yeah, it's just like a there, you know.
Okay, we're about an hour in, which I'm surprised it's actually already been an hour. And so we'll go ahead and pause, and just so I can beat Amy to the punch. If you're new, don't leave. We're just halfway through. We're going to continue on. So next week we are starting our coverage of Black History Month. So we're going to begin with the film Hidden Figures. And we are going to be talking with Manaro Geek about that film. And I'm really looking forward to that. I've actually never seen the film before, so I'm going to be watching it for the first time this week.
A movie I've seen that you haven't?
Oh, it happens more often than... So
once
yeah,
in a blue moon.
And then we've just also scheduled the following week. We're going to have friend of the channel, Jolie, on here to talk about the film Selma.
And she has a YouTube channel called All Hail the Night's Queen, so check that out.
And I have seen that one, so
Selma, yeah, I saw that in theaters.
So yeah, and that's we're still planning the weeks ahead, so we're actually scarily for the first time in a while not that far ahead in the scheduling. Amy, I know you're freaking out.
I'm breaking out in rash. It's so itchy, but I think I'm gonna be okay, John. I think I'm gonna manage.
So Amy, what do you have coming up over on your channel?
Well, since I'm a co-host of this channel, I am not limited to plugging only 3 things, unlike when I'm on Here Be Dragons and someone says you get to plug 3 things. So I have a whole sticky note, and I'm going to run through this real quick. I just wrote an essay with Julie, not Jolie, All Hail a Night's Queen, my friend Julie Araya Flint, and we wrote a letter to Jon Snow from Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones and let him know our thoughts about his leadership. We're going to have a video discussion of that. So February is going to be big for me. I got a lot coming up. So I have that. I have a video about the Air Nation from Avatar The Last Airbender. And I'm going to have Yogi, Archmaester Buzzkill. He has a YouTube channel called Through the Moon Door. I'm going to have Steven on, and I'm going to have Lady Triple Christina on as well. We're going to have a good time talking about air stuff. And then I'm working on an essay about yin and yang and black and white imagery in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I'm going to have this guy named Bronstadaries. I think it's Bronstadaries.
No, it's Bronte. He's one of my patrons.
Oh, really? Wow. I look forward to meeting him. We're going to have a good time. Anyway.
Yeah, I like him. I'm not familiar.
Yeah, he wrote an essay about black and white imagery in Song of Ice and Fire, so I look forward to having him on. And I have his Dark Materials stuff coming up with Lo the Lynx, my lovely Lo. We are going to write about Mary Malone and how her character squares science and religion. So we're going to have a good time with that. Speaking of Lo, Nessie and I are going to have them on for the next installment of Bleep the Patriarchy. Bleep it, y'all. And we're going to talk about the binary and why it is actually not a thing. We're going to have a really good time. That's going to be February 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And finally, my last thing to plug, I promise. Third episode of Buddy Banter. Who is it with? Also Lo the Lynx. I'm going to have them on, and we're going to talk about contemporary politics and fantasy and why they and I do not like to separate them. We're going to have a good time. John is going to hate it. It's great. So it's going to be February 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go live on my channel. So all of my links are in the description. I have a blog that is the companion to my channel. Originally, the channel was the companion to my blog, but now I think the channel's the main thing. So please check that out. I'm sorry that I had all the plugs. I am the queen of plugs. Please follow me on Twitter. I like to poll. I have 2 polls out right now. I'm Amy Poehler. That's Poller, and I want to know your thoughts. Thank you. You can wake up now, John.
So we'll just continue around. Steven, you have this channel called Here Be Something.
Phoenixes.
Yeah.
Look, you better recognize
Snakes?
a dragon is not to be trifled with.
Here be hot dogs.
Here be hot dogs, yes. Here be dragons. So a week from tomorrow, we're going to be doing The Expanse. 2 weeks from tomorrow, we're going to be doing WandaVision again.
Which, by the way, it's so funny that we just did our stream on WandaVision. We were talking about all these questions we had and theories, and it's like in the very next episode, all that stuff was addressed.
Yeah, but they gave us way more. We got way more.
They were like, they're talking about this, but we better do an episode about this. Like they're copying.
The big thing, and this is one I'm super excited about, is tomorrow I will be getting back to my I Know That Nerd series, and I will be joined by the illustrious Yoke Boy of Radio Westeros. I've been a fan of his and Lady Gwen since they started their podcast back in 2014. I can't remember if I found them on episode 1 or episode 2 of their podcast, but I've been following them ever since. Yoke Boy he's got a great sense of humor. He's going to be a lot of fun. He's also written my favorite fan theory, so we're going to dig into that too.
And it's funny because this has been kind of a departure for you because you've actually had to start doing this series with people that you technically
don't know
have not met because pandemic.
Hey. Yeah, but Yoke Boy is one of those that I was supposed to meet at a con last year, so I'm like, At some point, you run out of people you actually have met, and you start just finding people where you can. But yeah, I'm very excited for Yoke Boy tomorrow.
And Cecilia, tell us what you have coming up on your channel. You just recently had somebody on for your first English speaking stream.
Some guy,
Stanley Snart. He's great.
Some random guy out there. No. Okay. Seriously, I just released my first ever English spoken episode, and I had this guy over here as my first guest, and we talked about the first 3 seasons of The Expanse. I have already watched the whole 4th season, so I'm looking forward to start the 5th season so we can continue the conversation there.
Season 5 finale comes out Tuesday night.
So I better rush.
It's already the finale. Like,
I know.
What happened?
Dang. Good thing I have WandaVision to fill that show hole for a while.
Yeah. Okay. So, in the future, this Thursday to the next, I will be with Chris from Smokescreen. talking about the novel that he wrote, Crimson Gods. So it's going to be very interesting because well, I'm looking forward to also speak with authors talking about their work. So this is the first time, and it is very exciting. And well, I recent the past episode, the Spanish episode in Spanish, we spoke about Lovecraft, the Call of Cthulhu, and it was very interesting. If you are Spanish speakers or are just purely curious about it, well, you are welcome to listen to my content in the past and in the future. And well, I look forward also to have these other two persons persons here because well, I am a fan of soundtracks, and I know someone who is a fan of
Wait,
soundtracks.
what?
Cecilia, you're too kind, really. I'm not that much of an expert. Oh, wait, what?
Yeah, I would really love. I look forward to do an episode on Ennio Morricone. So be prepared. And
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I gotta say, when you have Chris on to talk about his book, ask him about his Stark banner.
okay, I will. Yeah, you mentioned it in our episode, in my episode.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Don't
yeah, I
forget to
already.
ask him.
No, I will. I will.
I bet he's still got it. So the story behind that is when at the first Con of Thrones, I did a Stark cosplay. I had an 8-foot long pole with a Stark banner and blue roses and a wolf head and all of that on it. It looked awesome, but I didn't have room to take it home with me. So and he was close by, and I'm like, "You want it?" And he's like, "Yes, I do." So I bet he still got it.
Okay, I'll ask him about it. And well, yeah, that's it. And my English episodes are going to be every two Spanish episodes. I mean, two Spanish episodes and then an English episode. For now, I plan on increasing the frequency later, but let me just grab some flow there.
I just want to say, Cecilia, because I know you were worried about doing your first stream, in English. You knocked out of the park. You did an absolutely
Thank you.
fantastic job. So
Yeah, I think it was great despite me being there.
I mean, I just had to mute it every,
When I was talking,
Every
yeah. But all your parts were great, Cecilia.
Thank
Um,
you, thank you.
No, I kid.
Oh, John, I did. I'm sorry. It's become my brand now.
No,
I'm just
no.
going to do this, and I'm going to put it back down, and I will not say anything else.
I made a joke in the Slack a few days ago. I was like, when I need to call Amy, all I do is I just pick up the phone and I go, I have heard the word of the Poppy War.
And as Kate has said, you can also look in the mirror and say patriarchy 3 times, and I shall appear.
Yeah.
So,
wait a minute. Saying patriarchy is what summons you, really?
yes,
Really?
because I'm there to smash it.
Oh, you're okay. I'm just saying when I say when you say
It's like me with pizza. You say pizza 3 times and then I'm there.
Okay, so let's dive back into Pan's Labyrinth, and we can just start this second half just by talking about the genius of Doug Jones, because that man pretty much, I don't know that there's anything he can't do. He is pretty much like Guillermo del Toro's right-hand man. He's usually involved in any project that he's working on, and he plays not just the faun, but he is also the pale man, which is like one of the freakiest creations I think in cinema. Which
so good.
Are you guys ready to be freaked out?
Ready?
Here we go.
Oh my
Ready?
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
I am
There's
living
my
right now.
nightmares.
Look at that funum.
Oh,
Ladies. contends. He's single.
I just want to pinch his cheeks. I just don't know if I want to pinch like his top cheek, his next cheek down, or his next cheek down. He's got like 4 of them in layers there.
You know, he'd lost a lot of weight all at once, and it makes your skin saggy because it really, you know how it is, Steven.
Yeah, what?
As someone who has been skinny his whole life, Steven, you totally understand.
Yeah, I totally understand what it's like to lose a bunch of weight.
But yeah, so I mean, this is one of Ophelia's missions, that she's sent on, where she's told to go into this underground lair, and she can't eat anything on the table, which of course she does end up, because if you paid close attention to the details, she goes to bed like the day before, without having anything to eat, and so she's actually quite hungry by this point. So it's like, I get it. and this
it looks good.
And this is all part of her sort of rejecting, sort of authority, and in this case, it doesn't work out so well for her. So that kind of sets her up for when the faun for the final task says, "You must obey me completely." She says yes. And then in spite of that, she has to then make the decision to sort of, do what she believes is right. But for this sequence, it's like she has to retrieve, we find out it's a knife and all that. But really, this whole sequence is just there to scare the living crap out of the audience.
This was a small detail of this scene, and I wanted to know what you all thought about it. When she has the key, so she's going to unlock it, the fairies show her the wrong lock. Does that mean anything to you?
Well, I think it's a point of her sort of trusting her own instinct.
Yeah, that's kind of how I read it, but I wasn't super sure. And also, I think what I found interesting about this is, and I think John, it may have been you mentioned in our watch party that the pale man represented greed because he has this huge feast just for one.
That wasn't me,
okay.
but
whoever in the chat might have mentioned that. I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was.
But
so
another
shout out
important
if you
point
did.
is that it completely mirrors the dinner feast, and the pale man is sitting in for Captain Vidal.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. It's like, I'm just thinking about the scene, and when it's like she starts going for the grape, and you're like, no, don't don't do that. And then the second that first, hand moves, it's like, this is such a tense scene. And Del Toro tells about a screening that he went to where Stephen King was sitting next to him and started squirming during this scene. He said that was better than any Oscar.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Side note, can you give Alicia Kingston a wrench? She's trying to post some links for something. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also
if you can get Stephen King to squirm though, and you've done something right.
Yeah, I think also something about this that is interesting, and what adds to the suspense is the hourglass. Right, she has the sand, and she can see how much time. Right, and so she's running towards it, and every time, no matter how many times I've seen this movie, I'm like, is she? Come on, just run a little bit faster. But it just closes on her right at the last second, right? But then she has the chalk too, which I find interesting, this idea of making a door. Oh geez, God, John.
And I'm
give
just
a heads up.
And I'm just going to say that several people during the watch party indicated that I say several people, it was really one person, indicated that this character resembles a certain American politician. I'm just going to leave it at that.
It's Mitt Romney.
That's all right. Somebody said it for you earlier.
Yeah.
Scroll up a little bit. You can find Danny McKay talking all about it.
It's great.
Because when I saw that, I'm like, that's hilarious. Yeah, this movie, like, on this watch, I was reminded how much of it actually is really set in the quote unquote real world. And she only visits this sort of magical reality a few times in order to do her little quest stuff. But I still, I love the aesthetic that they were able to achieve. It's very like the Muppets meet Cthulhu in some parts. With the big toad and the way it vomits its whole body out, you know. Yeah, I see you, Tony.
Clever, very
We're, we're,
clever.
we're still on Pale Man, but like, so they could.
No, so is he. Then
Yeah,
so
is
just
he.
leave it at that.
I got you. I got you. He's still on Pale Man. But there's something about the way this sort of the practical effects are blending with the CG in certain scenes, and like this movie is from 2006. Its CG is not flawless. You know, there's some disconnect on the color balance or whatever between the generated scenes, especially you can see it especially with that big praying mantis looking thing. But it's good. I mean, it definitely holds up. Um, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I think with any visual effects, as you know, it's been what, like 14 years since the movie was out. So naturally, you know, you're going to be able to see the age on certain effects. But I think they're still very beautiful effects. So even if, you know, you can tell the passage of time, they still look great. So yeah, but
I really appreciate also the labyrinth itself and how that feels so real and so mystical and forgotten, right? That's the one part really of that area that is left in, you could say, intact, as far as, you know, I'm sure there are many different structures that have been built and torn down in this area, but that feels eternal. And as the faun goes to tell Ofelia, it's the last one of its kind with it as a portal to the underworld. And so it shows kind of what I like about it's slightly unspoken, but kind of the role that fate plays in this movie. Like, you know, what are the chances that the, you know, princess of the underworld who's been reborn goes to the last, you know, portal? Well, it's fate, right? That she's fated to have this opportunity to return to the underworld. And so I really kind of appreciate how fate kind of weaves its way through, and those fans of The Witcher know exactly what I'm talking about, where this idea that fate is inescapable, you can kind of do move within it, but the overall structure of fate in a lot of these fantasy kind of stories, the overall fate and the overall trajectory cannot be altered. And I thought that was really interesting part of this movie. Obviously, Ofelia has to do things for herself, but you know, the overall drive of the plot, you know, is fate itself.
I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that you mentioned The Witcher, because also this idea with this movie is that you know, what Del Toro is very interested in is not like dumbing down fairy tales for kids, because kids are actually quite more sophisticated than they're often given credit for. And so, you know, having it's a fairy tale but with extreme darkness as well is very important. And The Witcher is steeped in fairy tales too, especially now as I've started to read the books. I'm realizing to exactly what extent, and I hadn't quite realized that before.
Which I'm so glad for. Yay!
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the labyrinth, it's the art direction of this film is just like, okay, so not everything there's a lot in this movie that doesn't take place in the sort of fairy tale world, but the work that has gone into all the you know, the production design, the sort of interior where, you know, all the supplies are, and where Vidal tortures, you know, the poor guy, that is as beautifully constructed as, you know, as the fantasy stuff. And It's just, and I love also the cinematography and the way that the colors are used, so that it starts off, you've got the real world is very cool colors, and then the fantasy world is warm colors, and then those two things start to intermingle, and especially as you reach the climax of the film, the colors are spilling over into one another. There's a reason it won Best Cinematography at the Oscars, and I think it's just one of the most breathtakingly beautiful films ever shot.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
Damn it, Steven.
I also like another theme that I picked up on in this, especially during this watch, was this idea of wanting to become something else or dreaming of being mortal, right? The princess dreams of the mortal world, and so she's comes to the mortal world, and the mandrake, right, is a plant that dreams of being a human. I kind of found that interesting, and it's something that very much went over my head the first couple of times that I watched it, that really hit me this watch, which I found interesting.
It's actually very much like the journey of Sophia, I believe she's a goddess or something, the wisdom goddess. Uh, she also falls in the mortal world because she wanted to know more about it, and now she has to uh, have this journey in order to go back to where she belongs, which is exactly what Ofelia is going through. And this is the part where you wonder whether what she lived was fantasy, pure fantasy in her head, or was actually true, because there are some of the things that actually happen in the fantasy world actually help her in the real world. So that's the part where the confusion or the controversy begins. For example, when she draws the door with the
I mean, that's the only plausible explanation for how she's able to escape her room at the end is that she makes a door.
They even find it drawn on the wall later.
Yeah. So, and I love that. I was talking about this in the chat of the watch party, where I like the fact that there's evidence both ways, and you're not given a clear-cut answer that, if you want to see that it's all harsh reality and what she saw was in her head, then that is an interpretation of the film, but also you can interpret it that it was real. And I actually think Del Toro leans, in that direction. That's his intent. But I think that there's a beautiful sort of sweet spot where it's both real and it's not real. And that gives you this dichotomy of tragedy and hopefulness at the end of the story, which I find incredibly beautiful. And sad. It's impossible not to break down in tears at the end.
Yeah, because it's impossible to 100% believe that she went to a better place after she died, right? You can be 80% sure, but there's always kind of that voice in the back of your head that thinks, is that a hallucination on her deathbed, essentially?
Yeah, and the final shot does, give you the line that, she left behind, traces for visible to those who know where to look. So this idea that children are able to, sort of children and people who have that ability to see are able to actually perceive this world in a way that the captain is not. So, when he stumbles upon Ofelia, he can't see the faun, which is not saying he can't see the faun because it's not there. He can't see the faun because he can't see the faun. He would not be,
he's not magical enough.
Yeah, he would not have the ability to see it. So, I just love the way that this film doesn't really give you an easy answer, because the rational thought would be to say, yeah, it's all in her head. The world is a cold, cruel place. But at the same time, this is Guillermo del Toro, and he's, and cinema and fairy tales are not reality. You have to
Mhm.
look at the story a certain way. So I very much feel like it's both in a beautiful sort of way.
Well, and the chat was Cecilia and I were kind of interacting with the chat a little earlier about magical realism. That is exactly the goal of magical realism, is to have these fantastical aspects that the audience is not sure what is real and what is not. And the characters themselves are sometimes either taken at face, sometimes taken at face value, whereas the audience is more skeptical. That's very much kind of magical realism, which is very popular, of course, in Latin cinema and also literature as well.
Yes. Hmm.
And actually some Chinese cinema in the early 2000s, for some reason, was very big into magical realism. There's a couple of movies I've seen in my Chinese cinema class that are almost exactly like this kind of magical realism, which is very interesting.
Yeah. If you would like to read a short story, a short novel of magical realism, and get to understand a little bit more about the genre, you can look for a book named Aura.
AURA.
Aura. Yes. Yeah, from Carlos. Oh my God, I forgot about the author. Let me just Google him real quick.
I do know that I had to look it up because I didn't want to say it
Carlos
wrong.
Fuentes.
I do know that,
Carlos Fuentes.
Carlos Fuentes is one, and then also Gabriel Garcia Marquez is also
Yes.
very well known for it as well.
And Isabel Allende also. There's actually a movie based on a book that she wrote with Jeremy Irons and Meryl Streep and Antonio Banderas and
Wow, what a cast!
I'm like, I watched that.
Winona Ryder. Yes.
Oh, wow.
It's a movie based on a novel from Isabel Allende that is also a magical realism. I highly recommend it. If you want, well, I recommend better the book than the movie. But yeah, you and you can see another and there you can see another
on a movie channel. How dare you, Cecilia?
I was going to say this ain't John Webster Books.
Oh, sorry.
The channel isn't called John Webster Books.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, John Webster film. If you want to watch the film, oh man, right now today I'm very forgetful. Let me. The House of the Spirits. The House of the Spirits. It's the name of the movie, the novel. And the
Antonio
novel.
Banderas is my celebrity man crush.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before Amy and I cover The Mask of Zorro at some point on here. And she has actually never seen Desperado. We're going to correct that.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
You've never seen Dirty Dancing? Don't at me, John. Once you've seen Dirty Dancing, I don't know what I'll use, but that's what I have right now. I remember I think I did make a reference at some point or something. I was like, nobody puts Amy in a corner. And I was like, oh, dang it, John doesn't fully appreciate that.
Well, no, I know the reference just because I've never seen the movie. There are certain, sort of cultural touchstones that you're aware of, even if you haven't seen it, Amy.
Well, you know what? I'm not alone. The chat gets to see us. This is what our friendship is like, just constantly getting mad at each other for not seeing certain movies. So,
just
like I'm mad at Steven because he doesn't think House of Flying Daggers is as good as it really is.
Nothing that I've seen here or anywhere else is worse. It's actually worse than, well, I was yesterday playing Overwatch online, and a friend of mine joined my group, and he started saying that he's not very good at watching movies, and that he had a list of movies that he hadn't watched, and that people told him, "Oh my God, why haven't you watched that movie?" And he shared that list with me, and Star Wars was there. Indiana Jones was there. Uh, the Godfather movies were there. It was shocking. It
Wow,
was
that is shocking.
shocking. It was
The
shocking.
sea people
Yes.
are worse than me. That's the TLDR of what we've been saying.
See, Amy and I basically constructed our list for the next, year or
70
so.
years.
We both made a long list of movies, and then we bolded the ones that we wanted to talk about. But see, the real point of that list was for us to be able to look at the stuff that the other person didn't bold and silently
And judge them.
judge
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gotten off the rails here, but I do want to talk a bit about the faun, and an important detail of his progression throughout the story is that when he first appears in the labyrinth, it's almost like he's coming back to life, from almost being, frozen still, and he's very sort of his movement is very shaky, and he's very old, and all that. And what happens is, as the film progresses, they actually change the makeup design and the prosthetics, where he gets younger and younger throughout the film, and sort of more, you could say, almost more pleasing to the eye, but he gets more untrustworthy as it goes on. He seems like he's friendly to start off with, and then by the end, he's Ofelia is very suspicious of him, and I just think that was a cool way to tackle that, And then, of course, by the end, we see that he was, testing her all throughout. I do love that moment where, he comes out from behind the thrones and, says, "You chose well, Your Highness." But I love what they did with his design all throughout the film. I thought it was very nifty.
And I like this point by Guilty because another major theme, because themes are important, another major theme is also a coming of age story as well, with this movie. And so it's interesting to see how the faun is old and getting kind of more spry and younger, right, as Ofelia is kind of waking up to the harsh realities of the world and becoming a little bit older in that way.
That is some fantastic costume design, though.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
The amount of detail in the texture of the skin, in the texture of the horns, the way the hair is here but not there, like he's got his little long soul patch and everything. What a fantastic design. And even down to, I don't know if you have a shot, John, of like the full figure of the faun.
I mean, the closest is just this one that I showed earlier, which you can kind of see the legs.
But like, even the way they execute his feet is very. It looks like they have some practical effect that they've gone back over with some CG.
No, actually, it is. The faun is practical.
100% practical, all the way down to the feet.
Yes, because from the knees down, it's green screen. I mean, his
yes. Because they were able to. I know I was listening to the commentary, and Del Toro had Doug Jones like operating the legs and stuff, and presumably they he removed certain things after the fact.
So they just CGI'd some things out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Like the from the knee down, his leg was covered in green, and the legs of the faun were attached to the back of the.
The legs are still practical, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good, man.
Well
so
done.
Good.
Yeah, amazing.
It's like, and that's why, like, especially nowadays, going back to what I was saying earlier about the Oscars, I do get extremely cynical about the Oscars, but like, just looking at this film and what they did with the makeup and prosthetics and stuff, and then seeing them actually win that best makeup Oscar, there are some times when you're like, yeah, man, they deserve that. And it was just absolutely beautiful work.
Yeah, there's a few questions I have, sort of like related to the one. Well, I can't remember. Was it you, Amy, that asked about? The fairy said, "This is the one," and she's like, "That's not the one. This is the one." When she goes to unlock the tiny little door,
Yeah.
um, there's also like, you got to feed these 3 rocks to the frog. Okay, that's weird. When you do it, he's going to puke out all of his guts, and there's going to be a key in there. I'm just like, is there some symbolism that I'm missing there, like feeding rocks to a frog, or take the left door, not the middle door, the first door?
I don't know about the frog, honestly. That sequence has always just come off to me as like, okay, that was weird. I do know that the whole 3 doors thing is kind of traditional and in fairy tales and stuff. That's a device. I think what's important is not necessarily which one she picks, but like the whole point for especially the second and third tasks is not like what she achieves, but how she achieves it, and the sort of decision making that goes into it. It's the fact that she chooses to not just listen to what the fairies are telling her is the correct door to open up.
How'd that work out for the fairies in the end, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, but
Munchies on.
and this is the thing though.
It's the monster eating the fantasy.
But the fairies reappear at the end. So was the pale man really the faun the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned the left thing about the left door, and she unlocks the faun, or this mythical word, when she puts the eye on the left. What if you see at the front? It's the left eye, and she has a moon mark on her left shoulder. Well, there are many things that are implied here. Well, one of the main things is what I was talking about, the feminine and the masculine side of life, right? Traditionally, the left side is the one that is related with the feminine side, or the magical side of humanity, and the right side, it's the opposite. And there is also some political implication here, because the Franco's dictatorship was right, was the was on the right side, right wing.
Just be very clear.
Yeah,
right wing.
Not
I was not talking about. I was not talking about it was being correct. No, not at all.
Like, we're talking about derecha and izquierda. We're not talking about.
Yes, well, it was
just to be not correcto. It's not what
right side. I mean, political right side.
It's like, I remember it's one of those things where you want to get all your thought out before leaving someone dangling there. I've many times like started to say something and leave off at a sort of crucial word, and they're like, "Wait, what?"
Wait, what?
And I'm like, "Yeah,
no. Just for the record, no, I'm not."
I just didn't want people adding you on social media, Cecilia.
Yes, yeah, no, I know. But these days you have to be very careful about what everything you say.
Because Cecilia said.
Can I comment? Eduardo Vasquez Garza in the chat says, I think the movie presents very well the duality or balance between coming of age and the escape of the harsh realities of the war, family situation, etc. I think you've nailed it. Like, because I mean, I'm in my mid 40s. I have come of age, but I have a channel where I talk about nerdy pop culture. If that's not escapism, I don't know what is. So it's a thing that continues for me, and probably for the rest of you, even up through the modern era, or through our like adult lives. And that also reminds me that they are reflections of each other, and you see that in certain places. And I think maybe if I went through this movie trying to find the parallels, I would find a lot more. Maybe I'd figure out what the heck this feeding rocks to a frog is about. But the Pale Man is a really excellent representation of the sort of like excesses of the upper echelons of society. But there are monsters that she's facing in the labyrinth, but there are monsters that she's facing in the real world too.
Yeah.
So
And I believe the Pale Man is a representation of Vidal.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
And you get Vidal becoming more and more physically monster as it progresses, to the point that when he has his mouth cut open, it's he's almost kind of looks inhuman at that point, basically externally become starting to take on a more monstrous appearance that he's embodied for the whole film, and he is the monster, as much of a monster as the Pale Man is.
And that this happens also in the shape of water as well.
I almost wonder if the frog, because that's a very messy, dirty scene, and I almost wonder if that's a little bit a parallel to the birth of her brother as well. And this like kind of this, I'm sorry, it's gonna get really gross, this like liquid, and and she kind of comes out like she's coming out of a womb. I don't know if there's anything there. But yeah, I know, right, Cecilia? I'm not into it, but that was my first thought.
Well, it could be. It could be. It actually could make sense, but I still don't get what the three rocks are for.
Yeah, I have no.
It's like the three.
Definitely, 3 is definitely
like the three
a huge
shells
part.
in. Is it like the three shells in the Demolition Man?
But I think it is sort of the recurrence of that number of 3. It's the 3 rocks, the 3 doors.
A trinity, yes. Mm-hmm.
A thought that I just had was that, and this is talking about the Pale Man and maybe his parallels with Vidal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Ofelia is safe so long as she stays beneath his notice.
Mm-hmm.
It's when she becomes not invisible, which is something that what is her name?
Mm-hmm.
The sort of like head kitchen lady. Oh,
You're not talking about Mercedes. You're talking
Mercedes.
about
Mercedes.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Mercedes talked about, you didn't know it was me because I'm invisible to you.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, Ofelia is beneath the Pale Man's notice until she takes one thing from him, even though he has all of this excess.
Mm-hmm.
She's not worth noticing until she takes one thing that belongs to him.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that later with her taking the son. He doesn't hardly ever pay attention to her until she's kidnapping his son.
Can I just take a moment to acknowledge how utterly disgusting it is, the visual symbolism of the Pale Man being this, creature that has this entire full table full of, all manner of food and drink, but all he is interested in eating is children. It's just disturbing on so many
and fairies.
That's again Kronos. That's again Kronos. That's Kronos once again. God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who ate all of his children until Zeus hella murdered him.
I mean, I've got a making of book for Pan's Labyrinth, and there are like whole pages just devoted to like having all these conceptual, art drawings of the Pale Man, like stabbing and eating children. And I know that, my family kind of took a look at this book and they were like, "What the hell are you looking at, John?" But yeah, it's extremely disturbing imagery, but it's so brilliant. It's like only Guillermo del Toro could conjure something up like that.
Okay, here in the chat, they're mentioning something interesting. Also, the symbolism and the magical process of the spells doesn't it feel like a grounding process, like the bridge between these coping mechanisms of the harsh realities?
You're going over my head, Eduardo. I got to be honest with you. Like maybe going the process of her going through these things is what's grounding her and what's sort of helping her in her road to maturity. I, am I? Is that how you're interpreting that question?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Oh, he says that yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Well, good. I don't know. We're sorry. Well, we'll let your point stand. I
Okay.
don't.
Well, I feel especially ashamed because well, he is one of my followers. And I'm like, I'm unable to answer that question. I don't know how to. Maybe the one person who can answer that question is Badia from the podcast Leyendas Legendarias. He knows all about chaos magic and that sort of stuff. Maybe he can give you that answer.
I mean,
uh,
from a purely sort of, shall we say, literary standpoint, I think
mhm,
that's as good interpretation as I've
mhm,
seen for anything else. Like it totally works.
mhm,
I'm with you, Cecilia. Don't ask me about how magic works. I don't know. Ask me
mhm,
about how science works.
So going back to the three, so we had the three stones, we had the three locks, and I guess you could say the third task is also three with the faun, the baby, and Ofelia. So it's certainly there's something going on with that numerology there. And obviously, I mean, most people, the first thought that they might have would be the Holy Trinity, but I also think of the maiden, the mother, and the crone.
mhm,
There's a very, and if you want to, there's also, if you want me to go further east, there is the three jewels of Buddhism, which are the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dharma, which I don't need to go into necessarily. But three is a very much an important number in many different traditions.
mhm. Even
Yeah.
Nordic traditions.
Well, I mean, it's in a lot of different cultures, I would imagine. But given that it's Spain, highly Catholic, the Trinity makes as much sense as anything else. And that actually kind of feeds into a point that I wanted to make earlier. You guys just keep throwing out such great stuff. It got lost, but I'm glad I remembered. Um, there's a read where Ophelia just dies and she's just dead. There's a read of the ending where she is Princess Moana and she goes to the Feywild and gets to be a princess for centuries, just like the story says. But there
Mhm,
is a third interpretation I think you can have if you are, especially if you're a particularly religious Christian person, where she holds to her ideals and is rewarded by going to heaven, so to speak.
mhm,
Like she's definitely taken to a place where her mother is there, her father is there. The little, it's not super obvious because it blends in with their dress, but her mother is holding a baby.
mhm,
Um, the faun is there, so it's all the magical beings that she met along the way could be interpreted as angelic beings, even.
mhm.
So I think there is an interpretation where she's dead, but she has received her eternal reward because of her sort of morally upright approach to her life up to that point.
there's also a a way you could look at it if you do subscribe to that she somebody dies at the end, and it's, you're looking at it as the cold harsh reality of that she is actually imagining these things, but in that through engaging with this fantasy she does escape this dark world that she's a part of, and even in death she achieves some sort of, victory and salvation, which, is I don't go that way myself. I think it's sort of even more sad in a lot of ways. Um, but yeah, many different ways you could look at it. And
Well, in a in a parallel with Jesus Christ, her death in a way, and the way she returns to the house of her father, in a human eyes, will be looked as a defeat, because, well, he died or she died, but she returned to the house of the father, and so from the divine point of view, she won, because she got to return home. And in a parallel with with the figure of Jesus, you see that very same thing, because, well, Jesus died and everybody thought that he was dead, but then you get the resurrection idea, with from the Christian point of view, is a win, but
Mhm.
from the uh, non-Christian point of view, he really did die, and these people just came up with the story that he resurrected in order to keep the myth going on, you know. And this is exactly what we see here with Ofelia, because from human eyes, she died, and this is why Mercedes is holding her, crying, because she understands what happened and the atrocity that this man did to her.
And just the cold-blooded way he just
Hmm.
shoots her.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
oh, it's
Yes.
chilling.
Once he has that baby in his arms, she's absolutely nothing to him. He only
Hmm.
needed her alive until he had secured his kid. And how hauntingly beautiful is that lullaby? I mean, that stuck with me. I remember the tune
Hmm.
from when I was 12 when I watched it for the first time. It's beautiful but also extremely haunting, and it breaks my freaking heart.
Hmm.
It's wow.
I haven't really talked about the music, but
What, John? You
shockingly,
falling down on the job.
but it's utterly heartbreaking. There's the lullaby, which is like immediately iconic. I remember even in the trailer, which for the most part had sort of traditional sort of trailer music, but then when the title comes up at the end, they throw in the lullaby. So I like, you instantly already know that, you know, just from the advertisements before you go and see the film, and it just stuck with me. It really only appears, you know, at sort of key moments throughout the film, most noticeably in the beginning, in the middle when Mercedes is, you know, humming it to Ofelia, and then again at the end. You
So
know,
it's in three parts of the film: the beginning, the middle, and the end. I like it.
yeah. Um, and
Or sorry, I'll do the German way.
and there's just so much other beautiful work. I think the whole sequence at the end, from, you know, when the faun is telling her, you know what, you know, to obey him, and to, you know, and to, you know, take the blood from the child and all that, and then when Vidal comes in and shoots Ofelia, the orchestration and everything, it's just so beautiful and tragic. And, you know, I mean, there's a reason why it reduces me to tears when I watch it. It's just beautifully done. But you're right, Amy. That lullaby is, I think it was instantly memorable, and it's, yeah. Every time I think of this movie, I immediately hear that in my head.
Hmm. Same here.
Um,
It reminds me a little bit of the song from Princess Mononoke, which I'm hoping we will have Steven on for. Um, it's kind of that haunting melody that gets stuck in your head.
That is a weird friggin' movie, man.
Princess Mononoke?
Yes,
It has a lot of the same magical realism.
it
I
does.
love it. I love it. It's my favorite of his movies. But anyway, but that's for another episode of Cinematic Realms.
Yeah, TBD.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so is there anything we didn't touch on that you guys want to bring up about the film? I think we'll be able to cap this one off at at just about 2 hours. Shocking.
Yeah, one of my
What?
kids.
Wow.
I can actually read for my classes after this. This never happens.
Yeah, I'm expecting a phone call from my kid in about 2 minutes. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. We really
Yeah.
wouldn't have a choice because Steven's gonna have to, gonna have to have his bathroom break anyway. So
no, I'm actually expecting a call from my kid in about
Oh,
2
okay.
minutes. She called me about 10 minutes ago, and I muted. And I'm like, I'll call you back and just call me back in 15 minutes or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'll turn it over to you guys. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
No, I think we mentioned everything pretty thoroughly, and well, it's just an amazing movie. If you haven't watched it and you stayed here, even for spoilers, well, go
Content
watch it.
previews.
Yeah.
I do think that this is the type of movie, like we've gone through a lot of this story elements, but I don't imagine that this is a film that would lose any of its power by knowing certain things ahead of time. I think it's the experience of going through and sort of absorbing everything. It's just so beautifully made and so emotional that I think even if you haven't seen it and you now know all about it, you will still get just as much enjoyment out of it.
yeah,
Yeah, and
and
I think the feeling of the movie is something that we cannot convey in this on this panel. So you will still feel the movie in a way that we can't express.
Yeah, I wish I could have played the lullaby like at certain points throughout the stream because
But we're gonna get hella copyright claimed if
Yeah,
that happens.
Yeah.
because there is just an emotion and as you say a feel of this film which is immediately apparent as soon as you press play, but it's hard to just talk about. But like I said, it's one of my favorite films of all time and one of the most. At the time, it was, as I said before, the most impactful film for me. Since seeing Fellowship of the Ring in theaters, and there's been a couple movies since that kind of go alongside that, but I would still say that this is one of the greatest films ever made.
yeah, and I don't. The only thing I'd like to say is to reiterate something I said at the very top. The film has an ambiguous ending, but that is a feature, not a bug, because the ending is not the worthy part of the story. It's the journey that Ofelia goes on to get there.
I mean, the movie literally starts off with the end. It shows Ofelia laying there, and actually, and that's a great part of it is that you have that shot of it's played in reverse, so you actually see the blood going back, upward and up into her nose, which is kind of the whole point. Del Toro is telling a story about this character's rebirth rather than her death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, go watch the movie if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, go watch it again. It's worth many rewatches. And I would suggest for my physical media plug, check out if you have 4K capability, get the 4K Blu-ray. If not, Criterion put out a beautiful Blu-ray edition a couple of years ago, which is very much worth checking out. Okay, there you go. Real quick, we'll just sort of recap what's coming up. And next week, we'll be talking about the film Hidden Figures with Manaro Geek. The week after that, we'll be doing Selma with Jolie. Amy, try and give
my things. I'm not even gonna do it. The mid-roll is when I tell you all the things, and then at the end I say just please sub to my channel. It's been the subscriptions have been going up, and they really make me feel good. And it's just one click on your part, but it brings me a lifetime of happiness. So thank you. And also follow me on Twitter. I just hit over 400 followers and I'm loving it. And because then more people see my polls. So I get the more kind of poll feedback I get, the more I feel like I can more confidently say that this is, the opinion of the fandom. So please follow me on Twitter and vote in my polls. Exercise your right to vote, and also sub to my channel. I've got a lot of great stuff. I'm also, other than His Dark Materials, A Song of Ice and Fire, and Avatar: Last Airbender, I am starting The Witcher. So if you're a fan of that, please check out.
All right. Steven, what's coming up tomorrow? Big stream.
I'm going to have some random guy on to talk about some random stuff. No, seriously, tomorrow is Yoke Boy, and I know that nerd. I'll be talking and interviewing with him for about 2 hours tomorrow. Come by, watch it live. We're going to have a blast. My irreverent, tongue-in-cheek, meandering style of doing things. So we're going to have a lot of fun with Yoke Boy tomorrow. Come by and feel free to ask him questions.
And Cecilia, go ahead and plug away.
Okay, you are welcome to my channel every Thursday, but I do have an announcement. I will be changing my streaming day to Friday after the next week after Chris' participation on my channel. This is because, well, I'm a mom, and I do have to make some adjustment, adjustments in order to fit this escape of mine into my real life. And the next English episode will be this next Thursday. No, the Thursday after the next week's Thursday. I don't know if you guys, and it's going to be with Chris from Smokescreen talking about his novel Crimson Guts. And if you want to watch another English episode, a past episode about The Expanse, the first 3 seasons, you're welcome to my channel, and you will find a random guy that I just found somewhere online. And just kidding, he's right here next to me. I don't know. Well,
everything is backwards on StreamYard. Down is definitely down on StreamYard. So I'll do it.
There you go.
I fixed it. See?
There you go. Steven was
Random.
my first English speaking guest, and I was very excited for that. So you can listen to my English content on Spotify or here on YouTube. And if you are interested in my Spanish content, well, you will find tons of it on my channel. So you are welcome. You're welcome there. You can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram. If you do follow me on Twitter, please note that most of my tweets are in Spanish, and sometimes sometimes the translations are not very accurate. Sometimes they don't make any sense at all because, well, Mexican Spanish is very characteristically hard to translate because our use of language is very peculiar. But you are welcome to follow me there. Sometimes I do tweet on English, so yeah.
Okay. So I think that about wraps it up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was wonderful to finally get to talk about this movie. Like I said, I absolutely adore it. I can't believe it's been 14 years since it came out, going on 15. It's insane.
And thanks to our guests for coming on. And Cecilia, it was great to finally have you on for a movie that is in Spanish. So that was
nice. Thank you, Cecilia and Random Guy. We very much appreciate you.
Yeah, we love a good rando.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, every time if you do want to dive into the Spanish material, the Spanish movies and that stuff, you can always invite me, and you can always ask me for recommendations, and I'll be happy to do it.
Excellent. Yeah, and trust me, we're gonna have you on, many more times, regardless. So,
We always find a
You
way.
had no idea what you were stepping into when you agreed to do Coco, did you? You had
Yep.
no
No.
idea.
Cecilia, we're never gonna leave you alone.
Okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm happy to do it. No complaints.
okay, and I don't know if we're gonna have a good rando back on or not. This, we tried this. I'm not sure if it worked.
Pretty sure it didn't.
But yeah.
I think his beautiful hair is too distracting. It takes away from mine, and I don't like that. I want to have the best hair on every stream. It's not fair.
Oh, you hair people.
Look,
Try out hats.
Ooh.
They're very fashionable.
my dark mane.
And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Have a great night. Bye.
Bye.